I was never the type to keep score. Not when it came to family, at least. For most of my life, I believed that showing up for people, being generous, quietly dependable, the one who handled things without making a fuss, would be enough. That it would speak for itself. But I've learned something over the past year, and especially during one unforgettable family dinner. Sometimes silence doesn't earn you respect. Sometimes it just makes you invisible. My name's Bryson. I'm 37. I run a small portfolio of businesses, some real estate, a digital marketing agency, and a couple investments in local coffee shops and startups. I wouldn't say I'm wealthy in the private jet sense, but I'm definitely doing well. Well enough that money hasn't been something I've had to worry about in a long time. But here's the thing about family. They don't always see who you've become. They lock you into the version of you they're most comfortable with. The one who left town at 22, who chased the money, who only comes back for holidays and birthdays and sends checks instead of hugs. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. Middle of nowhere, really. My parents, James and Darlene, are high school sweethearts, very salt-of-the-earth people. My dad worked in a factory his whole life until he got laid off in his late 50s. My mom cleaned houses, sometimes did childcare. We weren't poor, but we were always on the edge of something breaking. I moved out as soon as I could, college first, then jobs in the city, then my own thing. And yeah, I got lucky. I built something. But the more successful I became, the more distant I felt from the people I loved. I always made sure to help out. Quietly. If my parents needed a new fridge, it showed up. When their car died, I just happened to have a client who donated one. When my dad was diagnosed with a heart condition 2 years ago and didn't have great insurance, I told them not to worry. I framed it as, I've got some business write-offs I need to make anyway, like I was doing it for taxes. Truth is, I paid off over $80,000 in medical bills last year without blinking. They never asked, I offered. But I didn't make a big deal out of it. I figured that's what a good son does. You don't tally it up. You don't look for applause. But there's someone in my family who definitely does. My younger brother, Caleb, is 34. He stayed in town, works a regular 9 to 5 at a car dealership, and lives 5 minutes from my parents' place. He's always been the loyal son, the one who mows their lawn, drives them to doctor's appointments, helps around the house. And I don't want to diminish that, it matters. But there's always been this quiet tension between us, like he's measuring himself against me and always coming up short, even when I'm not competing. And instead of talking about it, he lets it seep out in passive-aggressive jabs. He makes these comments that sting more than they should. And for the longest time, I let them slide because I didn't want to cause waves. I thought, maybe I deserve it for leaving. Then came the anniversary dinner. My parents hit 40 years of marriage this past summer. Caleb organized a big dinner at this rustic local venue that used to be a barn and now serves overpriced steak and potatoes with craft beer. It was beautiful, fairy lights, vintage tableware, the whole thing. He did a great job putting it together, and I told him so. I even helped cover the cost. Not that anyone knew. I Venmo'd him a chunk without asking for recognition, just wanted to support. My girlfriend, Elise, came with me. We've been dating for a couple years now. She's poised, kind, sharp, and immediately clocked the weird energy the second we walked in. You know that feeling when you enter a room and everyone's already decided how they feel about you? Yeah, it was like that. We sat at a long table with about 25 family and friends, cousins, aunts, some old neighbors, my parents' church friends. It started out lovely. Everyone was chatting, laughing. Then it came time for the toast. Caleb stood up first. He gave a heartfelt little speech about how our parents' love was a beacon of stability in his life, how he learned what commitment looked like by watching them. It was sweet. Everyone clapped. My mom wiped her eyes. Then my dad nodded at me and said, Bryson, you want to say something? I hadn't planned on it, but I stood. I kept it simple. I raised my glass and said, to Mom and Dad, for teaching us love, sacrifice, and the kind of hard work that builds not just a life, but a legacy. I wouldn't be the man I am today without you both. I looked at them as I said it, and for a moment, my dad smiled like he meant it. Then Caleb laughed. Just one of those sharp exhales through the nose, like he couldn't help himself. I glanced over. He shook his head and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, you mean everything I did while you ran off to play rich businessman? The laughter around the table started small, nervous, but it grew. My dad actually chuckled. My mom gave Caleb a light shove on the arm like he was just being cheeky. My aunt snorted into her wine. I forced a tight smile, raised my glass again, and sat down, heart thudding against my ribs like a warning drum. Elise didn't laugh. She reached under the table and touched my knee, just once, like she was anchoring me. I didn't say anything. Not then. Not when Caleb made another joke later about me probably writing off the dinner as a business expense. Not when my dad called him the real MVP of the family for always being there. Not even when I caught my mom glancing at me like I was a guest instead of her firstborn son. But something cracked that night, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't just the disrespect, it was how easy it was for them to laugh at me. How easily my quiet contributions had been erased. I'd never asked for recognition, but I'd assumed, deep down, that it would come. That the truth mattered. But maybe the truth only matters if you speak it. That night, I didn't sleep. Elise curled up beside me at the hotel, her breathing soft and steady, and I just lay there staring at the ceiling. Running through every moment over the last 10 years. Every bill I covered, every flight I booked, every time I dropped everything to come home for them. And how none of it seemed to matter because I didn't wave it around like a flag. The next morning, over black coffee and cold eggs, Elise said gently, "I know that look. What are you thinking?" And I said, "I'm done letting them rewrite the story." Because in my briefcase, in the back seat of my car, was a folder I'd brought with me by chance. Inside were the receipts. Literal and metaphorical. Copies of the paid invoices from my dad's cardiologist and hospital. The email exchanges with the billing office. The bank wires. I hadn't planned on showing them. I never planned on showing them. But that was before the toast. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that sometimes the only way to get people to see you is to make them look. So I waited. I waited until the second half of the dinner, after dessert, when people were starting to stand, stretch, and mingle. I waited until my mom tapped her glass and said, "Before everyone goes, just one last thank you for coming tonight and helping us celebrate. We're so proud of our boys." And then I stood. I took out the folder. And I said, "I have something I'd like to add." And just like that, every eye in the room turned to me. And none of them had any idea what was about to happen. The room went quiet, the way a room does when someone stands who isn't supposed to. Not angry quiet, confused quiet. A couple cousins half laughed, assuming I was going to make a toast or crack a late joke. My dad blinked at me like he'd forgotten I was still here. My mom's smile was frozen in place, somewhere between polite and nervous. Caleb leaned back in his chair with that smug, lazy slouch of his, arms folded, already smirking. And me? My hands were shaking. Not visibly, not enough for anyone to notice unless they were really watching, but I could feel it. That slight tremble just beneath the skin. I've spoken in front of boardrooms filled with people wearing suits that cost more than my childhood home. But standing there in that rustic venue in front of people who had known me since diapers? That took a different kind of courage. I wasn't planning to say anything. I began, my voice steady but quieter than usual. And I certainly didn't bring this to make a scene. But I think, maybe it's time we put a few things on the table. A few people chuckled nervously. My mom tilted her head, confused. My dad's brow furrowed. Caleb didn't move. I placed the folder gently on the table in front of me and opened it. Inside were a few sheets of paper, just a few. I'd picked them carefully. The summary of the hospital charges, the final invoice showing a zero balance, the wire transfer confirmation from my business account, and the thank you email from the hospital administrator. "I want to tell you all a quick story," I said, glancing at the papers but not reading from them. "Last year, when Dad's heart condition worsened, there were a lot of bills. Some of you know how expensive it can get. Surgeries, follow-ups, prescriptions. And because of some gaps in insurance coverage and timing issues, a lot of that landed squarely on their shoulders." My mom shifted in her seat. My dad's face turned a shade redder. Caleb scoffed audibly and said under his breath, "Oh boy, here we go." I ignored him. I didn't want them to stress about it. I didn't want them to have to choose between treatment and peace of mind. So I stepped in. Quietly. Privately. I called the billing office. I worked with the hospital. I paid the entire balance off. Over $80,000. A silence felt like someone had sucked the air out of the room. My mom's mouth parted. My dad opened his to speak, but didn't. And I never brought it up, I continued. Because I didn't want credit. I just wanted Dad to be okay. I wanted our family to be okay. Caleb stood. "Wow," he said, clapping once, sarcastic and slow. So this is your big moment, huh? You want applause? A statue in the backyard? You couldn't just let us have one night. My jaw tensed. I stared at him hard. I didn't bring this up to one-up you, Caleb, I said. But you made it personal. When you joked during the toast that I ran off to play rich businessman, while you did all the real work, you made it sound like I abandoned the family, like I've just been writing checks and disappearing. He threw his hands up. You did disappear, Bryson. You don't call. You don't show up unless it's convenient. You send gifts like it's supposed to mean something. Meanwhile, I'm the one who changes the light bulbs. I'm the one who drives them to their appointments. My dad interjected then. All right, that's enough. This is not the place. No, Dad, I said, sharper than I meant to. Maybe this is exactly the place. Because for years, I've watched this narrative take shape, that I'm the selfish one, the absent one, while Caleb's the hero for sticking around. And I've let it happen. I let it happen because I thought it didn't matter. I thought the truth would win out eventually. But it hasn't. My voice cracked on that last word, and I felt my throat tighten. I didn't disappear, I said, softer now. I just stopped trying to prove myself to people who had already made up their minds about me. A few of my cousins looked away, uncomfortable. Elise sat still, her face calm but unreadable. My Aunt Karen whispered something to the woman beside her. I've flown across the country on 2 days' notice because Mom had the flu and needed help. I've helped with house repairs, quietly, through contractors I hired. I've covered costs you don't even know about, because I didn't want anyone to feel embarrassed. But no matter what I do, Caleb gets the hugs, and I get the suspicion. My mom finally spoke. Bryson, honey, that's not fair. No, what's not fair, I interrupted, is being treated like a stranger who just shows up to drop money on the table and leave. I love you both. But tonight, I watched as everyone laughed at me, including you, Dad, and I realized I've been giving without being seen. The silence that followed was suffocating. No one moved. No one breathed. Caleb broke it, of course. So what? You want us to beg for forgiveness? You want a medal? You think just because you paid some bills, that makes up for not being around? I looked at him, long and hard. I think it's interesting that you're so quick to dismiss what I've done. Maybe because if people knew the full picture, you wouldn't be the only one wearing the crown. Caleb's jaw twitched. You've got no idea what it's like being here every day, dealing with their stubbornness, their moods. You fly in, play savior, and fly out. And you think I don't carry the weight in other ways? I asked. You think just because I'm not here physically that it means I don't worry about them? That I don't stay up at night wondering if I've done enough? I've built a life where I can help them. And I have helped them. But all anyone sees is what's convenient. My dad stood then, clearing his throat. All right, that's enough from both of you. No, I said more quietly now. It's not enough. Because I need to know, when Caleb made that joke during the toast and everyone laughed, including you, did you think it was true? He paused, looked at me. His mouth opened, closed. And then he said the one thing I didn't expect. I think it felt true. That broke something in me. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. But something shifted inside, like a gear grinding out of place, never to return. I nodded slowly, more to myself than to anyone else. Right, I said. Okay. Bryson, my mom said, her voice suddenly gentle. That's not what he meant. No, Mom. That's exactly what he meant. And that's okay. At least now I know where I stand. I collected the folder and closed it. Elise stood beside me, placing a hand on my back, and I realized then that I'd been gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles were white. I'll be leaving in the morning, I said. Didn't want to make this trip about me, but I won't apologize for finally telling the truth. And just like that, I stepped away from the table. My legs were heavy, but my chest was lighter. I walked past my cousins, past the neighbors, past my dad who didn't meet my eyes. Caleb muttered something I couldn't hear. My mom called my name once, but I didn't stop. We got in the car. Elise buckled her seatbelt without a word. We drove in silence for a while, the sound of gravel crunching beneath the tires. Finally, she reached over, gently took my hand, and said, "You did the right thing." "I don't know," I replied. "I feel like I just lit a match in a dry forest." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe you finally burned down a lie that needed to go." The next day, I didn't say goodbye. I checked out of the hotel early, left a note at the front desk for my parents. Just a short message. I'm still your son, but I won't be your scapegoat. And I meant it. But the fallout hadn't even started yet. Because 2 days later, I got a phone call that changed everything. And that's when the real betrayal hit, one I never saw coming. For the first 3 days after I left, the phone didn't ring. No missed calls. No texts. No, where did you go? Or can we talk? Not from my mom. Not from my dad. Certainly not from Caleb. And I know what you might be thinking. Why would I expect anything different after what happened at the dinner? But the truth is, some small part of me, some rusted, childhood part, still hoped that maybe my parents would reach out. Not to apologize, necessarily. Just to acknowledge me. To say, we heard you. To ask if I was okay. But they didn't. The first call came from my Aunt Karen. Mid-morning. I was in my apartment back in Chicago, sipping burnt espresso and pretending to answer emails while my mind played reruns of that night on loop. I just thought you should know, she said, her voice low and wary. Caleb's been going around saying you threatened the family at the dinner. That you tried to blackmail your parents with money. I blinked. What? He said you brought some folder, waved it around, and said if they didn't start appreciating you, you'd cut them off. That you've been holding money over their heads for years. A few people already believe him. I didn't speak for a moment. My mind couldn't wrap around it. That's not what happened, I finally said. I know. I was there. But you should know. He's getting ahead of the story. And your parents haven't said a word. Of course they hadn't. Thanks, Karen, I murmured. She hesitated. Just be careful. You know how this family works. Oh, I did. I just let myself forget. That call was the beginning of a long, quiet unraveling. Over the next week, I started seeing the ripple effects. My cousin Leah, who used to like every one of my Instagram posts, unfollowed me. A few old family friends stopped responding to texts. One of my mom's neighbors, a woman I'd once paid 6 months' rent for after her husband passed, left a passive-aggressive comment on my business Facebook page about narcissistic sons who think money fixes everything. It hit me harder than I expected, not because I needed validation from them, but because I'd built this fragile illusion in my head that the truth would eventually speak for itself, that people would see through Caleb's resentment, that my parents would stand up and clarify things. Instead, they stayed silent. And Caleb? He doubled down. I started getting tagged in subtweets from his friends, thinly veiled jabs about family members who abandon their roots, and money guys who think they can buy loyalty. One of his Facebook posts read, "At least I'm not the kind of son who needs to carry around a folder to prove he's worth something." That one got 100 likes. My dad even commented, "Proud of you, son." And that was the real gut punch. I didn't eat much that week. Elise noticed. She cooked dinners I barely touched, sat with me in silence, rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep. She didn't push, just let me feel it. I remember one night, I was staring at the ceiling again, that same cold emptiness I'd felt in the hotel crawling back under my skin, and I said quietly, "What if they were right? What if I really did run off and forget them?" She turned toward me, eyes wide with disbelief. "Bryson, no, you didn't forget them. You made your own life. You built something, and you never stopped showing up for them. They just didn't want to see it unless it looked like what they expected. But maybe I should have just kept paying and stayed quiet." She sat up then. "Let me ask you something. If a friend treated you like this, dismissed your help, laughed at your pain, lied about you, would you still show up for them?" I didn't answer. She reached for my hand. "You're allowed to expect more from the people who say they love you." I nodded slowly, but inside, I still felt hollow. The next morning, I woke up to an email from my dad. No subject line, just 4 words. "Let it go, Bryson." That was it. No greeting, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what happened. Just those words. And for a while, I almost listened. I stopped answering calls from extended family. I removed a couple relatives from my company's holiday gifting list. I threw the folder, the one with the medical receipts, into a drawer I didn't plan to open again. I even ghosted Aunt Karen's follow-up message, because I didn't know how to respond without sounding bitter. I kept working. That was the one place where things still made sense. My company was launching a new client platform, and I poured myself into it. I ran 10 Zoom meetings a day, nodded at every milestone, checked every deliverable box. But it was all mechanical. Like I was playing the part of Bryson the CEO, while the real me waited somewhere behind a locked door. One night, Elise came home with 2 cups of hot chocolate and found me still at my laptop, staring at the same blank slide for 2 hours. "This isn't sustainable," she said softly. I rubbed my eyes. "It's fine. I'm just tired. She sat beside me, handed me a cup. You're allowed to grieve, you know. I didn't respond, but something in me cracked then. I set the laptop aside, leaned into her shoulder, and finally let myself feel everything I'd been avoiding. The anger, the shame, the ache of being misunderstood by the people who raised me. It didn't solve anything, but it was a start. The next morning, I pulled out a notebook and wrote one sentence across the top of the page. Who am I outside of them? It sounds dramatic, I know, but I realized that so much of my life, so much of my success, had been quietly driven by a need to prove something, to earn approval, to be seen. And now that I'd hit a wall with my family, I was finally forced to confront the deeper truth. I'd built a life to be impressive, not necessarily fulfilling. So I started making changes. Small ones, at first. I restructured my schedule to include time for actual hobbies, not just productive activities. I picked up woodworking again, something I hadn't done since college. I started going on longer walks without my phone. I reached out to an old mentor from my early startup days just to catch up, and ended up reconnecting with a few people who reminded me of who I was before I started performing for everyone else. I also launched a passion project that had been sitting in my drafts folder for years, a nonprofit mentoring program for small-town high school students interested in entrepreneurship. I named it after my grandfather, the only man in our family who ever told me I could do anything. Within a few weeks, we had our first cohort of 10 kids. One of them, a 17-year-old girl named Marissa, asked me during a Zoom session, "How did you know you wanted to be successful?" And I said, before even thinking, I didn't. I just wanted to be loved. The words hung there for a second, and then I laughed, not bitterly, but with a kind of surprised relief. Because it was true, and I wasn't ashamed of it anymore. A few weeks later, Elise and I went on a trip to Portland for her friend's wedding. It was rainy, cold, and absolutely beautiful. I left my phone in airplane mode for 3 days. Didn't check emails. Didn't think about Caleb. Didn't even dream about the anniversary dinner. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't replaying old wounds. I was just present. I started sleeping better, eating better, laughing more. And somewhere in the middle of that slow rebuild, something interesting happened. I started getting messages. Not from Caleb, not from my parents, but from their friends. My dad's old coworker reached out on LinkedIn. "Hey, just wanted to say, heard what you did for your parents. That was incredibly generous. Don't let anyone twist it." A neighbor emailed me to say her husband had recently been diagnosed with the same heart condition, and she wanted to thank me for advocating for better billing transparency. Even a cousin who had been cold to me after the dinner sent a DM. "I'm sorry for judging you. I didn't know the full story. It wasn't a flood, just a trickle, but it was enough to remind me that truth doesn't always echo in the loudest room. It travels quietly, person to person, and eventually lands where it's meant to." Still, I kept my distance. I wasn't ready to go back. Not yet. But then something happened that dragged me right back into the middle of it. Late one night, around 11 p.m., I got a text from my mom. Just one sentence. "I need to tell you something before it's too late." I stared at it for a long time. And before I could even reply, another message came through. "Your name was removed from the will. Caleb said you told us to go F ourselves. Your father signed the papers last week." I didn't move. I just sat there, frozen, the phone glowing in my hand like a fuse that had just been lit. I read the message 3 times, then a fourth. Then I set the phone down on the counter, walked to the sink, and poured myself a glass of water, trying to slow the sudden rush of blood in my ears. The apartment was dark except for the under-cabinet light above the stove. Elise was already asleep in our room, her book resting open on her chest. I just stood there in the kitchen, gripping the counter with one hand, glass in the other, trying to process the fact that my father, my own father, had signed a legal document that erased me from his legacy, removed from the will, because Caleb said I told them to go screw themselves. I hadn't. I would never. But in their silence, in their willingness to be manipulated, the effect was the same. I finally picked up the phone again and replied, "What are you talking about?" When? No answer. I watched the little typing bubble flicker for a few seconds. Then it disappeared. Then nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I barely moved. My mind was cycling through every emotion it knew: rage, disbelief, sadness, confusion, and finally landed on a single, sobering clarity. I had spent my whole adult life giving this family the benefit of the doubt, hoping they'd see my worth on their own, hoping the truth would rise through the cracks like sunlight through broken blinds. But people don't see the truth when someone's already handed them a more convenient story. And now they were writing me out of it entirely. I didn't care about the inheritance. Not really. I had my own success. I didn't need my dad's money or property or pension, but it was what it meant. What it said, that after everything I'd done, everything I didn't say, every sacrifice I never paraded, they were willing to cut me out based on a lie. And I knew exactly whose lie it was. The next morning, I called my attorney. "Hey, Patrick," I said, calm but cold. "You remember that family trust review we talked about a few years ago? Of course, you decided not to move forward with it at the time." "Well," I said, "I changed my mind. See, there's something Caleb never understood about me. He thought I was just the guy who threw money at problems and expected applause. But I don't throw anything. I place. Intentionally. Strategically. I build. I map. I invest. And when I play the long game, I win." Back in 2019, during one of my rare visits home, my dad offhandedly mentioned he was worried about his assets. Said something about taxes eating away at the house he'd spent his life paying off. I offered to help, naturally, but he waved me off like he always did when anything smelled remotely like financial advice. That was one of our oldest dynamics. He hated feeling like I knew more than him. So instead, I asked around, dug into the local zoning laws, talked to a buddy in property law, and I learned something interesting. Their home, the one Caleb was so eager to inherit, was sitting on a corner lot zoned for small business development. Not particularly exciting, unless you knew the city had just approved a nearby shopping center expansion that would double foot traffic on their street, which meant that the dusty, three-bedroom ranch house my dad considered his modest retirement asset. It was sitting on land that would soon be worth millions to the right buyer. I hadn't said anything at the time. I'd filed it away because, again, I wasn't playing to win back then. I was just trying to be a good son. But now I had a reason to play. I called Patrick and explained the situation, briefly, without emotion. I told him about the property, the rezoning, the expected value spike. Then I told him about the removal from the will, about Caleb's lies, and what I wanted to do next. "Can we legally contest the amendment to the will?" I asked. "Potentially," he said, "but it depends on the jurisdiction and how it was filed. We'd need to show undue influence, fraud, or mental incapacity." "What about land acquisition?" I asked. "If I wanted to purchase the lot from a future owner, assuming Caleb ends up with it, can I do that privately?" "Sure, but why wait?" he asked. "If the land is going to skyrocket in value, why not find a legal pathway to get it now?" And that's when it clicked. I didn't need to wait. I just needed to get creative. Over the next 6 weeks, I laid the groundwork. Step 1 was simple. I reached out to the city planning office under a different name, technically a shell company I already owned, and requested zoning documents for all properties in that district. I framed it as early research for a potential coffee shop franchise. Nothing suspicious, just due diligence. The documents came back, and sure enough, the city was planning to build a new municipal parking structure 2 blocks from my parents' home. That alone would double the land value. Within a year, any developer with sense would be bidding for the surrounding properties. Step 2. I created a second company, completely unaffiliated with me on paper, and hired a local real estate scout to start making low-level inquiries on nearby lots. This wasn't about buying yet. This was about stirring interest, planting the idea that something big was coming. Developers talk. Rumors grow. I needed Caleb to feel the heat. Step 3. I reached out to a trusted appraiser and asked him to quietly value the property, based not on the house, but on the lot's potential. The number he came back with made me whistle. "Any idea who else has this information?" I asked him. "Not yet, but it won't be a secret for long." Good. That was the point. Step 4 was personal. I called Aunt Karen. "Listen," I said, "you were the only one who warned me. I owe you some truth in return." And I told her everything. The medical bills, the folder, the will, the lies. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she exhaled so loudly it rattled through the speaker. "I knew something was off," she said. "Caleb's been acting like he already owns the place." "He might think he does," I said, "but I'm not done yet." Then I asked her a favor. I didn't want her to lie, just to tell a story, one I knew would make its way back to Caleb, about a mysterious company quietly making offers on all the properties along Chestnut Avenue. and how someone overheard that the land might be worth triple its appraisal soon. She agreed. She even smiled. "You've always been more your grandfather than your dad," she said. "He would have loved this." Within a month, Caleb reached out. For the first time since the dinner. His number lit up my phone while I was sitting in a meeting. I stared at it. Let it ring out. He tried again that night. Left a voicemail. "Hey, just checking in. Heard some stuff about the neighborhood. Thought maybe you'd know something." I didn't reply. 2 days later, my mom texted. "Did you tell someone to make an offer on our house?" I ignored it. Because the truth is, I didn't need to do anything else. Caleb was already unraveling. The rumors worked. The market was shifting. And now the property he'd fought so hard to inherit was about to become a liability. Because if he didn't act fast, someone else would. Someone like me. But I wasn't after the land. Not yet. I was after something bigger. Something louder. And the perfect opportunity was just around the corner. See, every spring, our family does a reunion picnic at Memorial Park. My mom organizes it. My dad grills. Caleb usually brings the speakers and plays old playlists that haven't been updated since 2012. This year was different. This year, I RSVP'd. And I brought the guest of honor. My lawyer. The morning of the family picnic, Memorial Park was already buzzing by the time Elise and I arrived. Kids running between the barbecue pits. Coolers cracking open. Folding chairs arranged in lopsided semicircles. The same faded James and Darlene family reunion. Banner fluttered from the same tree it had every year since 2003. It was a scene I knew too well. Warm, familiar, and this time, completely unaware that the air was carrying something else with it. A storm. Not loud, not fast, but precise. I hadn't been to one of these since before the pandemic. Part of me expected whispers, side eyes, maybe even someone telling me I wasn't welcome after everything that had gone down. But when we walked up, everyone smiled. Offered food. Nodded politely. Some even hugged me. Because that's the thing about rumors. They only work until the truth walks in wearing a tailored jacket and mirrored sunglasses. Elise and I set up near one of the shaded tables, nodding to relatives as we passed. She looked incredible, as always. Calm, poised, knowing exactly what this day meant to me. And right beside us, in a casual navy button-up and jeans, was someone most of the family had never met before. Patrick Weiss, attorney, strategist, and the quiet engine behind what was about to unfold. "Do we expect fireworks?" he asked me under his breath, watching Caleb lug a cooler across the grass. "No," I said, popping open a soda. "We expect clarity." It didn't take long for the vultures to circle. Within 15 minutes, Caleb had already made a beeline to our table. "Bryson," he said with a tight smile, looking between me and Patrick. "Didn't expect to see you here. Especially not with company." "Nice to see you too, Caleb," I said. "This is Patrick. He's here on business." Elise sipped her lemonade and didn't say a word. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Business? At a family picnic?" I figured, if everyone's going to keep confusing money with malice, I might as well bring someone who knows the difference. His smile twitched, just a little. "You've always had a flair for drama. And you've always had a habit of lying to people who trust you," I replied. He stiffened, then chuckled. "So what is this, some kind of ambush? You gonna pass out spreadsheets again?" I smiled politely. "No need. I'm not here to prove anything to you." Then I stood up and said loudly, "But I am here to clarify a few things." The music kept playing. Kids kept running. But a few heads turned. Aunt Karen definitely heard me. So did Uncle Phil and Cousin Leah. Caleb raised his hands like he was being arrested. "Oh boy, here we go again." I ignored him. "I'd like to say something," I said louder now. "Just real quick. Not a speech. A clarification." That got their attention. My mom looked up from the grill, startled. My dad paused mid-flip of a burger. Elise touched my elbow lightly, signaling I had the floor and the support. "Some of you know there's been tension lately. Misunderstandings. And that's fine. Families are messy. But I want to be transparent about what's really been going on, especially before things spiral even further." Patrick stepped up beside me, calm and professional. "Last year," I said, "my brother told my parents I threatened them, that I used my financial help to manipulate them. Based on that lie, I was removed from their will." A few gasps. My mom looked down. My dad stared, stone-faced. I didn't find out until after the fact, through a text, and I chose to walk away. Caleb was fuming now, red-faced, shifting on his feet. No one wants to hear this. I'm not asking, I said, turning to him. I'm stating, because you spent months poisoning people's opinions of me, and now they deserve the truth. He opened his mouth, but Patrick stepped forward and said, we're happy to provide documentation, including hospital billing records, correspondence, and bank statements proving Mr. Bryson covered over $80,000 of medical debt anonymously and without conditions. He did not, at any point, threaten to withhold support. What he did was step back after being mocked, disrespected, and deliberately cut out of a legacy he helped secure. Silence. You could hear the wind through the trees. But that's not the reason we're here today, I continued. What you all should know is that over the last 6 months, I've been working with the city's planning board, developers, and my legal team to explore a business acquisition project in this area. Now people were really paying attention. Patrick nodded. We've quietly purchased 3 properties adjacent to James and Darlene's residence through one of Mr. Bryson's companies. Based on public rezoning approvals and upcoming development initiatives, this area is projected to increase in value by 200% over the next 18 months. Murmurs. Head swiveling. My mom paled. Caleb blinked. Wait, what? I turned to him. You didn't know? That's surprising. You did spend the last year playing king of the castle. Patrick pulled out a manila envelope and handed it to Caleb. That's a formal purchase offer for the property. Full cash value. 25% above projected market rate. It's valid for 30 days. Caleb flipped through the packet like it was written in a foreign language. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead serious, I said. See, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for resolution. You wanted the house. You fought for it. Fine. Keep it. But now you know what it's really worth. You can sell it and walk away with more money than you ever imagined. Or you can hold on to it, deal with the city, the developers, the permits, the taxes, the offers, the lawsuits, the attention. Your call. His face was red now. Sweating. Panicked. I don't understand. Why would you do this? I looked him in the eye. Because I want you to understand what it feels like to fight for something, win it, and still lose everything that mattered. A long, quiet beat passed. Then I turned to my parents. I loved you both more than anything, I said. And I still do. But love without respect is just performance. And I'm done performing. My mom looked heartbroken. My dad, stoic as ever, just nodded once. I don't know if it was guilt, regret, or silent acceptance. But I didn't need a scene. I didn't want one. I just wanted to leave on my own terms. Patrick turned to the crowd and added, for legal clarity, Mr. Bryson has no intention of contesting the current will. He's not interested in what was taken. He's interested in what he's building. Then we packed up our things. Elise, Patrick, and I walked past the stunned picnic, past Caleb still clutching the envelope, past the tangled years of misunderstanding, bitterness, and silence. And as we reached the car, I looked back one last time. They were still watching me. But this time, they weren't laughing. They were listening. And that was enough. Because sometimes, revenge isn't about hurting the people who hurt you. It's about showing them who you've become without them. I didn't need their name and a will to prove I mattered. I just needed to stop waiting for permission to live like I did.